The House Select Committee investigating January 6th has acquired nearly 2 years' worth of Alex Jones's texts. The InfoWar host's legal team accidentally shared the trove of messages with opposing attorneys during civil trial proceedings.
CNN confirmed the messages were handed over to the committee by Mark Bankston, the attorney who represented two Sandy Hook parents who successfully sued Jones for nearly $50 million in a defamation trial that concluded last week. On January 6th, Jones breached the restricted area on the Capitol grounds, though he did not go into the building. So that was the end of the trial for now. I watched some of it. I thought Jones was in a rough spot because he'd spent a lot of time prior to the trial defending kind of the things he'd said about Sandy Hook, and then going into this trial, it was more about how, yes, he actually acknowledged getting it wrong, and he tried to talk about how this was actually not representative of his coverage in general, that it was actually a small part of the kind of coverage he does. The issue for him there is, A, that doesn't matter. If it was wrong, it was wrong. If it was live,
right.
It was defamatory, it was defamatory.
And B, proved otherwise. That
right.
He'd made quite a bit of money off of specifically doing the Sandy Hook denialism.
And his other coverage is also defamatory.
Right.
So
right.
Probably defamatory, not proven.
And it is interesting. He did lose some face because you're right. His posture outside of the context of the trial was, I didn't do anything wrong. In the trial, he took a little bit of that, more of a defensive posture, saying, "Hey, I was just asking questions. I wasn't making any claims about anyone specific." He claimed he didn't even know the name of a specific, Sandy Hook parent. All of which, of course, was undermined, or a lot of which, anyway, was undermined by the texts that were accidentally turned over. I'm sure counsel got a really severe talking to after that. But it does undermine his kind of public persona as being fearless and, indifferent to the consequences of his actions. I'm also really curious how this outcome is going to be read in the broader context of the defamation trials that have been politicized over the course of the year, namely the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, which in and of itself has gotten fresh eyes on it after some recent disclosures this past week.
That will be interesting. Also, obviously interesting what effect this has on January 6th stuff, if there's interesting information in the Alex Jones text. I saw, again, a lot of media obsession, now we're going to get the answers. The answers were buried in Alex Jones' cell phone all along. It will prove the vast orchestrated conspiracy, probably involving Donald Trump, that, this is more of this kind of resistance fanfic here. It would love, I think, resistance Democrats, resistance media people would love if Trump was finally undone because they had accidentally obtained Alex Jones' text messages. It's such a...
Well, look, I want to be careful here, Robby, because what would I prefer to be talking about? A $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all. It's a no-brainer. Whether or not I'm frustrated with Democrats for making more out of 1/6 than they do the issues that I think pertain to average Americans, I completely agree. If evidence falls into one's lap that someone like Donald Trump was breaking the law or inciting violence or doing something that is quite bad and destructive to the republic, I don't think that that's a frolic and detour. I think that you have to investigate that.
Yeah, it's almost like he should be impeached and removed from office. We did it already.
I want to make sure that we're not doing kind of moral cover for the underlying accusations, should they become true, simply because we also are not big fans of resistant liberals. The fact of the matter is, Alex Jones has been revealed in the context of this trial to have been doing something very bad insofar as he was defaming the parents of slain kids. Liberals and leftists have been critical of this for a very long time. He has had plausible deniability among the right for a very long time. And some people now, in the context of the outcome of this trial, might feel a little differently about that. I saw Jimmy Dore, making the argument that he defended Alex Jones's right to say what he wanted to say on his platforms because he does believe in mechanisms like defamation trials to hold people accountable better than doing censorship on social media. And I think that so other people might feel similarly. Yeah. But that's not the same thing as saying, I'm indifferent to whatever might come out of these texts because it will be enjoyed by people I don't like.
Well, I'm not indifferent. No, I'm talking specifically about the January 6th angle. No, if he was found to have defamed these families, I think the case was persuasively made. I don't think it was particularly close. According to defamation law as it exists, he is guilty. That was the verdict, and it doesn't seem wrong, or obviously wrong to me. You can have a broader philosophical question about, should defamation law be structured in such a way that, very, very few people, I might be only one of them, who are no longer so on board with even the concept of defamation. It in some sense violates, right, free speech philosophically, to have this category of speech you can't say. But setting that aside, sure. Well, you
can say it, but the argument is that you have to pay damages for harm you create, just like in any other tort,
Right, but you can create harm through your speech that's not actionable because it doesn't violate what defamation law says you're violating.
Well, there's the conversation specifically about having to prove damages,
right.
Like real damages, and obviously there were also punitive damages here.
No, I'm saying, but if you believe that the answer to bad speech is more speech, we've carved out some exceptions. There are some recognized exceptions to the general free speech principle, this being one category of them. I'm not sure, just philosophically, that I necessarily agree that it is important to have this category of speech that is beyond the bounds. That's all I'm saying. It's just a philosophical.
Interesting.
Do you think I'm crazy for that? This was kind of designed to stop people from dueling each other, right, over perceived slights to your reputation that don't quite matter anymore, are not.
I just think it needs to be thought through. So, for example,
it definitely needs to be thought through.
In the context of the Me Too, movement, if a woman were to make accusations about a man, it could be very damaging, especially in the context of a broader social movement like that. If they were not to be true, would you still maintain that he should have no legal recourse? If this is exactly what happened in the Johnny Depp trial.
In other countries that have stricter defamation and libel laws, bringing true claims of sexual misconduct against someone is so prohibitively difficult, it routinely doesn't happen and is not even covered by the media.
Right, but not
because they have made their defamation standards too easy to prove. We are not quite like that.
Sure, but in the example that I brought up here in the United States of America, would you still, looking at it through that lens, argue against the?
I don't know that being able to bring a defamation suit against someone who falsely accuses you is enough of a barrier anyway, or enough of protection, or
really, even in the context
still
of
happens
this Johnny
all
Depp
the time. Well, but it happens to people all the time. People are falsely accused of things all the time. We don't live in a world where there are no false accusations because it's possible to sue someone.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily argue that. I think you have to prove that something was false. And in the case of, many of these Me Too accusations that were in fact either true or so ambiguous as that you can't prove falsity. And that's what's going on. But in these instances, again, the Johnny Depp case is, I think, really instructive. The implications here are obvious.
A very rich and powerful person's ability to use this law to get. Look, I'm absolutely not speaking against that. I'm saying philosophically, if you want to be the most maximally principled free speech stance would be you also have the right to say false things. And the answer to you saying false things is then the other person says, no, that's false, and you just air different views in public. That would be a philosophical point.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking.
We went a little afield from the topic. What I was trying to say, I'm not strongly. I've newly come to this view actually from trying to consider specifically because social media companies have protection from liability that is often criticized as unfair because non-online media companies don't have these same protections. And people have said to me, well, isn't this a hypocrisy? In effect, a subsidy for these firms rather than these firms. And I'm trying to figure out how I would correct it. And one of the ways to correct it, instead of additionally making these companies liable the way all other companies are, which I think would break the entire internet, would be to just have this protection across the board.
The issue in the social media context, it's not that Twitter is saying defamatory things, it's that the platform allows individuals to say defamatory things.
Right, and you can't sue Twitter.
You're not a publisher. So, it's this distinction between whether or not you're a publisher with editorial control like the New York Times or whether or not you're simply a platform. And that's.
But these platforms do exercise editorial control, right? They do, because they do banned. It's a different level of editorial control, but they in fact do act with editorial control all the time. So then people will say, well, why is the law different for them? And it's just because the law is literally different from them. And well, is that fair?
Is the answer then a kind of more free speech absolutism in the context of the social media account to
that's essentially what I'm saying.
Right, but them not being liable is not the same thing as the person who says the thing.
I'm saying maybe the way to fix this is to make all those other media companies not liable for the speech on their...
Twitter not being liable for something I say that's defamatory on there is not the same thing as your right to sue me for saying the defamatory thing. That's the distinction that I would make. But I don't mean to keep...
We went way off topic with this one, but hopefully it was instructive and interesting for the viewers, and something we'll talk about again.
Well, Jones isn't the only one in hot water over these leaked texts. Fox News host Tucker Carlson is reportedly, quote, shitting himself, scared that the messages will be leaked to the general public. The Daily Beast reports that Carlson and Jones text on a daily basis, and if made public, those messages would be highly embarrassing for Carlson.
Okay, I have to interrupt. The Daily Beast is a trash publication, a gossip rag that has no idea what Tucker Carlson is thinking, and if it would deeply surprise me if he's worried or scared about anything in his text message with Alex Jones. He has a quote on Alex Jones' book. You can read his, he has not made any secret or shied away from kind of...
I don't think that's the argument, Robby. I adore my best friend, and I don't think they've done anything wrong, and they're certainly not Alex Jones, but I definitely would be shitting myself, in quotation marks, if our text messages were released, because that's the nature of private correspondence. There's any number of embarrassing things that people say privately that are out of step with their public persona, that are personal, intimate details, and as a lawyer who spends most of your time, looking through discovery as a young attorney, one of the earliest lessons you learn is how little you should really commit to print. And I think anybody in any context should be very nervous, especially, not to mention people who are so high profile, and not to mention people who have now had a demonstrated history of going against the law, as Alex Jones has done. And given the high profile nature of Tucker Carlson, some of what has been revealed in the context of the 1-6 hearings, where other Fox News hosts were shown to have been reaching out, texting Donald Trump, encouraging him not to say things that could be characterized as incitement, because they understood their own culpability and how that would be so difficult to defend on their own programs. Given that we know all of that has already happened, I would think it would be unusual for anyone who has ever texted with Alex Jones not to have concerns about how those texts will be received by the public should they come to light.
I think it's an utter fantasy to think this worries Tucker Carlson in the least bit of fantasy that, of course, the Daily Beast would like to participate in, but we shall see. And tomorrow on Rising, Max Alvarez and Pamela Denise Long will be back for our Rising panel.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are available anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can also catch us on the Plex TV app.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.